And thanks, Benzie, for reminding me that we should never put out policy prior to an election unless we're being hounded by the press and told that we never put out policy when we're in opposition.
I always believe that the soft underbelly for the Liberals, or what their weakness is when they get a little bit too far ahead of themselves in terms of arrogance. And I would welcome the arrogance to be shown over and over again.
So you're being, I think, quite generous in how you describe it. Other people would have a different word than hypocrite, but it's for them.
But we got the power to do it, but we weren't really meaning it was actually an existential threat. Maybe an existential threat to us being elected to a fourth term.
A woman you may be very familiar with, especially if you've been following politics in Canada for quite some time, or at the very least, watch this channel frequently. Miss Lisa Raitt joins us today. We had a chance to speak a few days ago, and this is definitely a good one with lots of honesty. The way that I would probably best describe Lisa Raitt, and I've been watching her forever, so to have the opportunity to actually speak with her was truly such a great honor. But she is an absolute spitfire, a truth teller, a fact checker, all while also having this overwhelming warmth to her, like just the best qualities, really, when it comes to being a really powerful woman who knows what you're doing. She is currently the managing director and vice chair of global investment banking at CIBC Capital Markets. She also served for a very long time in Parliament as a former cabinet minister representing the Conservative Party from 2008 until 2019, where she held a number of key portfolios. Today, we chat about Mark Carney. We chat about Donald Trump. We do talk about Buttongate. I know that's kind of a little bit of old news for some people, but there's a lot to pick apart with kind of getting into the layers of that situation. And she does so beautifully. So I certainly hope that you enjoy today's episode. I'm Jasmine Lane. Subscribe, follow, like, comment your thoughts down below. I have a feeling you're going to have a lot of them by the end of this episode. The one and the only Lisa Raitt, thank you so much for joining us.
It is my great pleasure, Jasmine. I'm so excited to be on your pod.
It's pretty unreal, the timing right now, and trying to lock things in with some people, especially such as yourself. Obviously, you have a ton of background in the world of politics and dealing with people on panels. Yeah. And so I'm really excited to kind of get into some of this. Obviously, you are very familiar, I presume, with Buttongate that took place at the Canada Strong and Free conference over the weekend.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to see Mark Carney's response to that today?
No, I didn't see his response. Tell me what it was, and then I can tell you a story about buttons and how these things happen at conferences, because it's not an isolated incident.
Okay, good to know. His response today was pretty lackluster. He just said that he apologizes for the lapse of judgment, more or less, okay, and that the two people who were involved, who were caught bragging about it afterwards, have been reassigned, and that was that.
Okay, so. Well. Let's name and shame them, eh? Let's find out who it is.
Yeah.
That's my goal. In politics, I've had one really great, I've had many good chiefs of staff, but one that's been with me the longest. He started his career by owning his own button making machine and taking him with him to opposing conferences where he would make buttons. Now, not necessarily liberal ones, but like if we had a leadership race or something, and he would bring his button making machine with him. By the way, these things are very heavy, or they used to be very heavy. In fact, I think his machine is still in my basement, to be honest, and it's too heavy to move. But so the thing is that you would make these buttons up, and they tried to be funny, and you would just try to get a message out. What happened here, though, is it was an attempt to pretend it was a conservative button and then drawing attention to it, because you knew that other buttons being made by other campaigns were being made by another campaign because they would be anti this or anti that. Mm-hmm. They never purported to be made by the entity that you were at. And that's the problem that I have with it. It's very nefarious. I gotta say, it's not cool at all. If they'd gone in and made buttons that said something along the lines is Carney's better than Pierre, and they distributed that, jokey. But to try to bring attention to a conference, a conservative conference, hoping that media is going to pick up on these buttons being passed around that kind of, feed into the whole Trumpian stuff. That's not funny. That's not clever. That is nefarious. And, being reassigned is one thing. They should be gone. So
yeah,
it's a firing offense.
I think a lot of people are on that same page. Even some people on the liberal side of things, not many, but some who I've spoken with have said the same too. Because it's one thing to and also there's different rules and regulations when it comes to election cycles, right? And the things you are and aren't allowed to do.
True.
And
I hadn't even thought about it like that.
So. Yeah. With that, though, I mean, very curious in general. That perfectly leads into my next question here, because it's something that, wow, I cannot even begin to explain how frustrated I am by this constant narrative, this constant rhetoric around Trump. And the fact that you would have liberal campaigners who had this plan, and the whole thing was so that they could more align conservatives with Trump, which to me is just so ludicrous. Like, I don't even know what words to use. It's just so infuriating because it's a nothing sandwich. It's nothing. It's so crazy to me, even for that to have grabbed the way that it did, because you essentially have the Liberal Party of Canada saying that they're going to fight for democracy while totally smearing and slandering another country who elected democratically their president that you just happen to not like, and then turn your whole country, or attempt to turn your whole country, to be against that president who was democratically elected. What are you actually trying to do here? It just makes no sense to me. It hasn't from the get-go. And sure, Trump tariffs are annoying, obviously, but also that's not the big issue here. And it's just bizarre how much that has really, really made some solid ground in a lot of people, which makes me wonder, from your perspective, and you sit on panels, I've seen you on CTV dozens of times. What is that feeling like for you when that topic gets brought up about, oh, Pierre is like Trump, the conservatives are like Trump, oh, they're just going to bend the knee to Trump? And how does that make you feel? What are the things that go through your head? Perhaps even what are some of the things you wish you could say if there was enough time on some of those panels about that narrative?
So I think it's an irresponsible narrative. I'm going to start there. And the reason why I think it's irresponsible is because what Canadians deserve in this election is a debate around issues and a plan for the future. Because for the last 10 years, my opinion, and I think it's borne out by data and the facts, we've really drifted as a country. We've done some great things. I will give great credit to the Liberal government in what they've done in Indigenous reconciliation. Very important. And I'm glad that we did it. And it started something off where the next government will absolutely pick up on it and run with it. So I think they've done a great job there. Where they have absolutely failed is setting up our economy to deal with shocks like a US president that isn't in love with normal trade, that he wants to take the country in a different direction. And you're right, Jasmine, he won. Period. Stop. So he has the office, and you got to respect the office of the president. But you also have to level with Canadians about what actual power do we have. And the reality is that without a strong working economy that you can survive this for a long period of time, putting up fights and slogans is not helping anybody. It's not helping anybody at all. And where I think it's actually harmful is this love of liberals to paint this morality over conservatives all the time. If you don't believe in this, you're a bad person. And if you like some of Trump's policies, you're a bad person. And we're going to fight you on a personal basis. And we're going to make fun of you. And you're the kind of people that I don't like. And I just think that's irresponsible, because everyone's got different opinions. Not everyone has to agree with the ruling party. In fact, opposition is necessary. It's necessary. That's the word. It's necessary. So much for my great panel stuff. It's necessary in our society. You have to feel like you can raise your voice without being batted down as being a bad human, because that's not going to be productive in the long run, because nobody's cornered the market on good ideas, as far as I can tell. Like I said, the Liberals did something good in Indigenous work. And I think the Conservatives, by a long measure, are in it to build projects in this country that are going to float us in an economy that we can all be proud of going in the future. So I get annoyed with seeing the Liberals go down the path. I also think that they're hiding their platform at this point, because they know that their platform is not what is going to, I don't think they're going to get a great agreement from the Canadian public on it, because they're not going to build pipelines. They're not going to they're not going to invest in projects that are important for energy in this country. They're going to stay on the same old path, which is going to further hobble us as a country. And they're not coming clean. Instead, they want to wave their arms around and talk about Donald Trump and say nasty things about him. And there's lots of things you can say about him. I listened to representative from China talking about the tariff war vis-a-vis China. And he said, China's been around for 5,000 years. Americans have been around for about 200 years, and we're going to be around for another 5,000 years. And when he was asked to comment on J.D. Vance or on Donald Trump, he just kept coming back to, as a nation, we know who we are and we know what we can do, and we're going to continue to do what we have to do, instead of getting into a bun fight as to the individuals, which is where we are in Canada. And it's not a solid approach.
So much of what you say, obviously, I definitely agree with. And it's one of those things. I'm not incredibly young. Maybe some would say I am, but I'm 28 years old. I feel like I'm 90. And there's been so many conversations that I've had with people who say, like, how on earth can you be conservative? And to be fair, I've always leaned conservative. When I was much younger, I maybe would have considered myself to be a little bit more of an NDP. And I've been interested in politics for as long as I can remember, honestly. Like, we only got the bunny ear TV growing up. And I used to watch the debates when I was 10 to 13 years old. And that was my entry into the realm. And there was a really stark thing that happened when I finally decided to just say what I think. And that was this realization of, hey, you know what? I can still be a really rational, nice person who cares about the economy and who cares about the end result of what all of these fancy things like actually provides. There's so many people who come at me frequently who say, oh, well, the Conservatives voted against XYZ. And I always come back with, yes, why? Why did they vote against it? It's not because they absolutely reject the idea. It's not because they resent you and your family. That's not why.
Right. Like, exactly. There's always policy. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And people don't think about that enough. And it's so frustrating. And that policy as well is largely what has put us into such a vulnerable state right now. And it's really sad to me that too many people are caught up in the noise. And of course, that's how these things work. They want you to be caught up in the noise, right? So that you aren't looking into all of those other things. And even in terms of pipelines, Mark Carney has said how many times we're doing pipelines. We're not doing pipelines. We're doing them. We're not doing them.
He's not.
So, and it's not going to happen. Anybody who has had the unfortunate time frame of reading his book would know that is absolutely not happening at all. And I, on that note as well, I'm very, very, very curious. There has been a lot of talk, I should say. I've heard this on, the legacy media. I've heard it parroted on social media as well, of people who say that conservatives are mean and Pierre Poilievre is mean. And we don't want to vote for him because he's just really cold and mean. What would you say to people who have that mindset?
I would say this, and I've thought a lot about it. I'm trying to figure out what it is that people are reacting to when it comes to Pierre. And I'm contrasting it with how they think about Mark Carney or how they thought about Trudeau. And in both cases, they look at Carney and Trudeau and I bet you they think that these guys are above them, right? They're smarter than they are. They have a better quality of life. They were born into riches in the case of Trudeau, or they're higher social stratus. And therefore, they want to be seen as to be voting for these guys because that's what the norm is doing. Pierre isn't the norm. Pierre comes from a very humble background, much like most Canadians come from a very humble background. And I would say that I would 100 times out of 100 times want somebody who understands how I lived, fighting for me and my country in the highest of office, than somebody who has spent many years trying to control what happens in the country from the top down. So Pierre is going to know the strife and the struggles of everybody. And listen, Politics isn't rocket science, Jasmine. Moving policy is not something that you have to have a master's in or a PhD in. You just have to have good common sense. You have to be able to take advice well, make decisions, and balance stakeholders and try to make what's best for everybody. There's nothing magical about being the smartest person in the room in terms of getting the right path forward. You got to rely upon all the different voices. And in fact, there's a danger to having somebody like a Trudeau or a Carney who truly believes that they know the way and only they know the way. And I reflect upon Mr. Carney's book. He basically says that I know the path. This is the way we should go. Somebody's going to put their hand up and say, but that's going to have an impact on me that is disproportionate to the amount of pain that I should be feeling. So can we amend that path? And what we've seen from Trudeau and we've seen from the Liberals is they say, no, we must go down this path and we have to go in this way. And I'm not going to take your advice. Pierre's going to take people's advice. He's going to try to balance stakeholders. He's going to try to get to the right answer that is for the majority of Canadians and not for an ideology and not for the purposes of furthering a cause that may be a very good cause, but you can't do it at the disproportionate pain of another part of society. You got to be in this together, and people have to know. And I think the best example of this is the carbon tax.
Mm-hmm.
And Pierre, when I was in Parliament in 2017, 2018, Pierre was talking about the carbon tax. He was talking about senior citizens having eventually to make the choice between heating their home and feeding themselves because the carbon tax was so disproportionate. And lo and behold, here we are in 2025, and the Liberals have discovered that the carbon tax is expensive and it has a disproportionate negative impact on certain parts of society, and they canceled it, right? But for Pierre, that wouldn't be on the agenda. So I believe that we need a leader who gets it from the beginning, not one who has to wait 8 years to be shamed into doing something because eventually it shows up at the ballot box.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny. I've said this a number of times now. It's one of my favorite sayings at the moment, actually. But Mark Carney, if you go through his history, he has like master's, PhDs, whatever, in economics as well as philosophy. So I always say the best part about him is that he can totally destroy your economy and then give you a TED talk afterwards about why it was morally superior for him to do so.
Okay,
awesome.
That's very funny. That's very funny. And you know what? Mark Carney's not a bad guy at all. And I don't want to paint people as good and bad because I don't think that's fair. He's done a lot for the country. He has come back to public service. That's totally admirable. But I just think what the country needs at this moment, at this point in time, isn't another talking head who thinks they know the way to fix the country without understanding the country as it is now. And Pierre understands the country as we are right now, warts and all. He knows us. And he's going to help put together the best plan for everybody. Crime is a great example. Crime is something that we worry about in the suburbs an awful lot. I live in Milton, Ontario, very close to the 401, which makes us a prime place for bad people to come in, steal our cars, do break-ins, jump on the 401 and tear out of there. They're not from Milton. They're from other places, and they're coming in to do harm. And we need to stop that. But for the Conservatives, the Liberals wouldn't even be thinking about it as part of a plan. It's not something that happens, you know. If Mr. Carney or Mr. Trudeau are in danger, they hire private security. Well, we don't have that option. We have to deal with what we have, which is the court system as it is and the policing system as it is. And as a result, Pierre gets it. And that's why he's bringing forth legislation that is punishing the bad guys, because it'll work. It works. Deterrence works.
Hey, though, Jagmeet Singh today said that the current justice system is working just fine. I was like,
For who? Like it's not working for the judges. It's not working for the Crown attorneys. It's not working for the defense attorneys. Maybe the people who are out on bail committing another offense, who get to go out on bail again to commit another offense, to go out on bail again. Maybe it's good for them, but it's not for victims. And trust me, I'm a recovering lawyer, and a lot of friends who are judges and crowns, they're exhausted. There is so much backlog, and they're just tired of letting bad people out.
It's funny, actually, in my neighborhood, we're not quite in the inner city. We're just kind of out of it, but the crime has really branched out now, especially when it starts getting a little bit warmer out. And somebody had broken into my car, and I thought, I'm like, we should get a camera in the back alley. That would make perfect sense. So we install a camera. It cost us like $300 to get this system. And then they broke into my car again and then also stole our camera. So
that's a horror
It's just
story.
Awful. It's just awful.
But trying to protect yourself, right?
Yeah.
You can't tell me there's not a problem in crime when individuals are doing these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you're instigating it as well, right? When they know that they can get it, that's just how it works. It honestly, to bring up Trump again, I remember when he had first started some of the deportations. There was a woman who was on television. I think there was a Fox News host down, I don't know where. So I think it was Colombia actually, who had followed this plane of deportees. And people have their own opinions on what he's been doing there and how that's been going. But this one woman, she was deported with her baby as well as her husband, and her husband had been very involved in gangs and had committed a number of offenses in the United States as well, which is why their family was deported. And when she was asked by this Fox News anchor after they landed on the tarmac, what would you tell people in your community who are thinking about going to the United States illegally? She said, don't go there because they're just going to deport you and it's not worth it. And I was like, wow, that's the messaging that you need, that, right? You need to be tough on some of these things so that it makes an impact. That's so very important.
And that allows us to have immigration with people who truly want to come to our country and build it and need a safe place to live and are going to be contributors, which is the majority of our immigration, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend who just got his citizenship 2 weeks ago. It was the most beautiful ceremony ever. And he's from Argentina, though, so he lived under socialism for much of his life. And the first thing, this isn't fake, the very first thing he said to me after he handed over his permanent resident card and got it swapped for his citizenship card, got his picture taken, whatever, and we all went around, gave him hugs, took photos. And he obviously knows where I am politically. We talk about it often. And he said, I'm so excited to vote for Pierre Poilievre in this election. And I was like, that's awesome,
I think that's great. Getting back to the kinds of conservatives, I mean, I'm an East Coast conservative, so I would tend to be more seen as like a red Tory, but there's room for me in my party. And the more that you try to call names of my other colleagues, and I know they're not bad people, just the stronger I become blue, stronger and stronger.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that too. I see similar things all the time, and it's just there's such a disconnect, and it's intentional. It's very intentional why there's this disconnect, and it's really sad to see overall. I'm curious as well, your take. You've had some of your colleagues on those CTV panels have said a number of times now that Pierre Poilievre has this losing strategy, that he's falling, his messaging isn't hitting right. Do you believe that that's true at all? Or why do you think it is that they say things like that on the public broadcast domain?
I think they're completely incorrect. I think their strategy is what I said at the beginning. They are talking about the things that Canadians want to talk about and need help with. And we're being sidelined right now by a circus of tariffs and a circus of trade issues. And the markets are reacting, and different parts of the Canadian society are reacting more strongly than others because they're looking at their investments getting destroyed. But the fact is that the majority of Canadians in this country don't have enough money to put into investments. They don't have the ability to put a down payment together. And those are the policies that Pierre's talking about, quite frankly. And every time we put out a policy, the Liberals steal it. That's fine. At least they're seeing it. But I would say to the Canadian public, they're not going to implement it, but we will. Conservatives will. What we say we're going to do, we actually do. And we can execute on it very well, done it in the past, and do it again. And as a result, I think this is the best way. He's covering off the things that matter. The stuff we talked about today about crime, I feel bad for the people who are perpetuating the crimes. Yeah, perpetuating the crimes. I feel bad for the people who are committing the crimes too, because perhaps if they felt that they had a path in a productive economy which pays as well as crime does, that maybe they wouldn't be, tempted to go down that path. Maybe they'd have better support systems. So I think talking about the economy makes a whole bunch of sense in a bunch of different ways, and recognizing and not buying into the hype. Like up until December, those Liberal ministers were telling us how great we had it in Canada. It's suddenly they've realized it's not great, and it's what people are feeling. And you know that people are feeling it. There are some people doing very well in this economy, and they're all voting for Mark Carney. But the people who aren't doing well in the economy, if they think that the Liberals are going to change it for them, they're not. They're not. They're going to go back to exactly the same stuff they did before. And and what's worse, Jasmine, is if they do win, and they do get a majority, they're going to say that they were given a mandate to do whatever it is they want to do. And some of the stuff that they'll do is not what Canadians want them to do.
Yeah, it's been really interesting noticing the different things coming out on the campaign trail, and the amount of things that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives have announced, prioritized, given a voice to, that will actually really help us mentally as well as in our wallet. Is massive. Whereas I've noticed the Liberals, there's been a couple of things where, okay, I could see where somebody might think that that's really compassionate and virtuous or whatever, but they have yet, as far as I can tell right now, and if I'm wrong, I'll correct it, but as far as I know, they have yet to announce anything that is going to actually help our economy. They have announced a lot of things that require much more spending and, help for people who do really need it right now. But I have yet to hear of anything major that's going to improve investment in this country or improve our ability to utilize what we have underneath of our feet and to utilize the talent that we have in this country.
Yeah, even last night, Mr. Carney was on Tout le monde en parle in Quebec. He was asked point blank about pipelines, and his response was, well, we're going to build some projects, maybe pipelines, we'll have to see, maybe not. So when a politician says maybe, they mean no. Yeah. I'm just going to tell you that right now, because you can easily support what you want to do. If you're delivering bad news, you couch it in a maybe. So to me, that's a clear sign that they're not going to be building pipelines, which is exactly what we need to get our resources to market. And the far majority of Canadians believe in that. We can't be beholden to any country but our own. We've learned this lesson. We now know. Yeah. And, I think it's a tough lesson to learn at an awkward time, and people may dislike Donald Trump, but I got to tell you, Jasmine, the Americans have always been in it for America. That's my experience in government. And Mr. Obama, Mr. Biden all made decisions that went contrary to Canada's economic good that were specifically good for the Americans. And they both brought in Buy America First programs that we had to negotiate our way through. There's no question about it. And that's okay. It's their country. It's their right. That's what they do. But I don't see anything. I understand, however, that there must be a platform somewhere, some out there that the Liberals will unveil, and they'll cost it out. But I expect it's what you said, which is more income supports for industries that are going to be crushed in a trade war with the United States, as opposed to putting investment in areas where we can get projects up and running and jobs created.
It's symptom versus cause solutions, for
Good
sure.
way of looking at it,
Yeah. What do you think is the most important thing that people should maybe hear, or at the very least think about when it comes to this election and things that are getting kind of drowned out by all of the noise?
Do not believe the narrative from the Liberals that only Mark Carney can represent us as a country, that he's best placed to represent us. And I'll tell you why. I have never seen in my lifetime, ever seen in my lifetime, an election where the people who invest in the major projects in this country, the people who run investment companies, who run funds, who run pension funds, are lining up to endorse Pierre Poilievre over Mark Carney. Big ad in all of the legacy media on the weekend with I have to say, the top hits of who invests in this country in terms of private money to keep the economy going. And on the other side of it, even more impressive is the endorsements from the people who do the building of Canada, from the electricians to the to Leuna, to everybody who has come forward to endorse Pierre Poilievre, from the building trades to all the trades, because they know that Liberals only say they're going to do something and then they don't follow through, because they've been waiting for 10 years. They put their trust in the Liberals 10 years ago, and it hurt. I mean, we lost a lot of seats as a result, but they have had the ability to see over time that what they said they were going to do, they didn't do, and that they can see the book of business going forward just isn't there to support the economy. So they're saying, no, that's it. We're going to support Pierre. And the investors know that to get a project done in this country, it's almost impossible. And they know that the reason why it's almost impossible is because of the amount of regulations that the Liberals have put on industries as they try to get up and going in the country. So we have a world where the richest of the rich and the working people have an agreement on the right person to bring us to a better future. And that's Pierre Poilievre. I think that, to me, is the best endorsement you can possibly have.
Well, I guess that is probably a good place to end this off. Lisa Raitt, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I always love talking to young conservatives, by the way.
There's not a lot of us, especially women, but I'm working on it.
I agree. I've got 2 sons, and luckily they have seen the light, and they're on the right side of the political spectrum.